Hello, you're listening to Overwhelm is Optional. Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Overwhelm is Optional. And in this episode I'm going to be talking about how you can use the experience of lockdown to reduce your overwhelm. So that might sound a bit crazy because I think a lot of people are talking about how overwhelmed they feel at the moment. And if you're spending a lot of time in a state of crisis, which would obviously make sense because this is a crisis, but if you're spending a lot of time really delving into the pain of the crisis, so if you're watching the news a lot, or you're watching a lot of negative stuff on social media, or you're talking about what's going wrong, what could go wrong, and that's the kind of that's where your attention is, then yes, of course you're going to feel worse. But I want to talk about the opportunities of doing something about that, of noticing what happens. So at the moment, a lot of the external pressures that were there before have been temporarily removed. And yes, a ton of other pressures have come in. So you might argue that, okay, so I don't have all the time pressures and all the huge stuff to get done outside, the travelling to places on time and, fitting everything in. But actually, I'm really worried about my family and the world and money and health and everything. So it doesn't make any sense to see this as an opportunity. But I would argue that when we're really overwhelmed, it's really easy to think that if we made some changes, we would feel better. So, for example, for me, I thought quitting my job would solve pretty much all the problems, but it didn't, because what I learned was that I was creating some of those problems myself. Now, it's not that simple. It's not like I was completely to blame. It's not about blame. It's just examining the patterns that we get into. And it's really difficult to get any overview of this when you're in the middle of it. So the fact that there's been a huge shift allows you to examine your life and find some of the ways that external circumstances contribute to that horrible, paralysing state of overwhelm where you feel drained and you don't know what to do next and you can't see the wood from the trees. At the moment, it is possible to start getting a bit of clarity if you can just delve into a few questions and consider it. That's what I hope for you anyway. So one of the keys to getting out of overwhelm and staying out of overwhelm, one of the keys to making it optional for you is to really notice how you feel in different circumstances and to notice what's going on for you personally. So it is to dig deep internally. So we're just going to do this with a few questions and just use this as an opportunity. So first of all, how are you feeling? So if you were going to rate your overwhelm, just, at the moment, what's going on in your head? So just observe what's going on in your mind, where your mind is hijacking your attention. If there's a loop of doom about the state of the world or about anxieties, about your family's health or money or whatever's going on, just for a moment, see if you can observe your mind as if you were like an explorer. So it's a neutral observation. It's like you're taking notes. So you could do this as like a weather forecast. My mind is really stormy right now. Or, yeah, actually, it's all right. It's a little bit of sunshine coming because it's Friday. Or whatever's going on for you. So we're just gonna take that a bit further and make it even easier for you to check in by just checking in with the body. So whatever you're doing, if you just want to be still for a moment, and if you can, close your eyes. Obviously, if you're driving, you're not going to do this. You're just going to do it later. So if you can, if it's appropriate to, just close your eyes, otherwise keep them open. And then place your attention in your feet. And just become aware of your feet. Any physical sensations at all. Feel the ground beneath your feet or your socks or your shoes, maybe wiggling your toes. So you're just anchoring all your attention in your feet. And your mind's going to keep dragging your attention away, and that's normal. And the game is you catch it out and go, haha, caught ya. And place your attention back in your feet. And then place your awareness in your belly. And just notice any physical sensations in the belly. Allow the belly to soften if it wants to. And if it doesn't, just notice that. So you can feel your feet on the ground, softening belly. And then notice how much space is between your shoulders and your ears. Just notice, don't try and change anything. Feet on the ground, softening belly or not. Allowing the shoulders to come away from the ears if they want to. And just noticing if they don't. And then notice how much space is between your teeth. And then just notice how you feel. And then open your eyes if you'd close them. And just notice how you feel. Notice how overwhelmed you feel, how tired you feel, how fed up you feel. Notice if it feels like your body wants to just run, like I've had enough of being locked up in my house with these people. Or notice if actually you're feeling quite comfortable and at ease, and whatever's going on for you. Just notice. Okay, so now we've checked in, let's really have a go at some questions. So if before the lockdown you were feeling really, really overwhelmed because you were rushing around, kind of like pushing and striving through life, and now a lot of that has been removed and you're now at home, what does that feel like? Is there less overwhelm, the same or more? And also, are you surprised by any of that? So if you were really overwhelmed before and really struggling, and now a lot of the things you had to rush around doing and getting completed, a lot of the people that you were having to interact with that you might have felt pressured by, if that's been removed and now you're at home and you like being at home and you were expecting that if you didn't have to go into all of those things, you would feel better. Do you feel better? Or do you feel worse? Or do you feel the same? So this is just a noticing, because whatever you feel is whatever you feel. So just notice that for you, because that's really valuable information. And then notice if on top of this, there's some judgment. So if you feel like you ought to feel differently than you do, notice that as well. Because we tend to be incredibly judgmental of ourselves. We're also pretty judgmental of others, but we're in general, very critical of ourselves. We tend to compare. So if you feel like you ought to feel other than you do, notice that judgment. So you're noticing everything. You're noticing whether there's any change in this state of overwhelm for you. And then you're noticing your reaction to that. And then just be with that, because that is how you are in relationship to your journey with overwhelm and making it optional and being able to move in and out of it, or to notice when it's approaching, when things that triggers it for you, that's too much. You've got overtired, maybe you needed to rest, maybe you needed to not attempt to do all of those 50 things on your to-do list. So it's just that noticing. And it's very, very helpful to do this noticing quite a lot, particularly at the beginning of a journey out of overwhelm. Because the more you do it, the more you start to get those lovely aha moments. That's what happens when I just carry on doing that, rather than stopping. Sometimes we get overwhelmed because we just don't eat when we're hungry, or we don't move when our bodies need to move. Sometimes it can actually be quite tiny things. In fact, I would recommend doing really small things, because big changes are super overwhelming. And if you're overwhelmed, you really don't need to add to your overwhelm by putting pressure on yourself to make these giant changes, which is really common, isn't it? You know, if we compare ourselves to other people and we think, oh, I ought to be able to do all of these things because so-and-so does, so I ought to be different, so therefore I need to change something about myself. I need to exercise more, I need to sleep less or more, I need to drink more water. There's always some ought to. There's always some mind judgmental instruction, which is almost downloaded from Google. We make it so complicated. We're all unique. Yes, we have similarities, and our bodies have all these amazing signals to help us, and we just seem to squish them down and go, no, I don't need to move. I'm a robot. I can sit at a desk for 8 hours without moving and feel brilliant and not at all overwhelmed by that, because I'm just not human. Or, not drinking when you're thirsty, not resting enough, or not having enough fun and laughter and movement and nourishing food. We just seem to miss out a ton of stuff, and our bodies actually, just tuning into them, can get you out of overwhelm really quickly. And the good thing about being at home in lockdown is that you can really pay attention to that, because you can break all the rules now. You're no longer stuck in a job where you're not allowed to go to the toilet. You're at home. You can go to the loo when you need to. You can get a drink of water when you need to. You can make a cup of tea when you need to. You can eat good, healthy, nourishing food as long as you've got food in the house. You can think about and prepare your food because you have time now. Now, obviously, this isn't the same for everyone. So if you're at home with small children, it could be outrageously difficult to do these things. But you could start to think about how you can look after yourself better, rather than waiting for the crisis when you feel really tired and then, oh, now I need to eat and I need to feed everyone. So just see, I'm not saying this is easy. I'm saying there's an opportunity, because a lot of the normal stuff has stopped. And when normal stuff stops, that's a chance to compare. That's what was going on then, but it's all stopped. So it's a bit like when you go on holiday, that our hope is when we go on holiday that all those normal pressures stop, but they often don't. We take them with us, and it can take us the whole holiday to unwind. And by the end of the holiday, we've unwound and we don't want to go back, or we've started winding ourselves up again because we're kind of bracing ourselves for getting back into normal life. The difference here is you don't have any control. You didn't choose this. You might not want it. You might not be very happy about being at home. Some of you might be really happy about being at home. This isn't a judgment about any of that. This is you have an opportunity to notice what works for you in your life and what doesn't work so well. So for me as an introvert who works from home anyway, not much has changed in terms of how often I go out, but I'm actually more connected than normal, and that's quite tiring for me. So I've spent about 8 hours on Zoom this week, and I'm completely over-zoomed, and I had to cancel the last meeting yesterday because my eyes hurt, I couldn't think anymore, I was exhausted. And I always find it interesting how I can feel physically exhausted without exercising. Because what's going on there? Is that tension getting stuck in my body? Is that lack of movement that caused that? Is that exhaustion? I think it's overuse of my mind. I still haven't completely worked out the connection of how it ends up as exhaustion in my body. But I find that interesting. And yeah, I didn't have that much control over how long the meetings were because I wasn't running them. And I'm grateful for the meetings. I'm grateful for those support networks. So it's not a complaint, but for me, that's a noticing and a learning experience. So I'm now shortening my Zoom meetings because it's probably the same for a lot of people. We're all getting over-Zoomed at the moment. So what can you notice about how you're setting up your day, now you've possibly got a lot more control over it? So I was talking to one friend, and she said it's really nice not having to set an alarm. And even though she sets one because there's a meeting at work in the morning, she wakes up anyway before that. So that's just a safety net. And that pleasure of being able to sleep until you naturally wake up, that's really valuable information, isn't it? Because at the moment we have quite strict ways of working in the UK, where schools and workplaces tend to all, get going at a certain time, which is understandable. But maybe this will start to get us questioning why it happens that way. Now, obviously, schools need to support the ability for people to work. So even though for teenagers it might be better for them to start learning at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, that's not necessarily going to be that easy to set up. But it's worth considering it. It's worth thinking about how we set everything up, why everybody's having to do the same rigid thing, why we work the same hours in the winter as we do in the summer, or I don't know. Just thinking about what works for us. How can we stop wandering around just getting stuff done, feeling overwhelmed, not quite living this amazing life? Maybe we could do something. But what about you? What could you do? So what's better for you in lockdown? Notice it, pay attention, absorb that information, and then see if you can follow that. So you can use the body as a guidance system. So I think the easiest way to do this, there's two things which I think are particularly significant. One is a sense of ease. So ease to me is not being so laid back you can't do anything. One of the reasons ease is my biggest way of describing the opposite of overwhelm is that sense of ease is not, it's like this poised relaxation. You know, you're ready, but you're at ease because you don't need to brace as if a disaster's coming. You're just happy in your body. You feel strong and stable and welcome. And you just feel like you're in the right life. You know, it's like, I'm at ease. I'm here. I'm fully here. It feels like I'm at home in my body and I can respond rather than just trying to catch up with myself all the time in this state of overwhelm, not being able to think properly, not really ever quite getting there. You know, when we're just overwhelmed and we're just doing stuff and it doesn't ever stop because you get the top of your to-do list down. It's like whack-a-mole and 50 things get added to the end because there's no clarity of thinking. There's no space to get the mind to work in an easier way because there's no ease there. So this is an opportunity to really notice when, as you move through the day, what's making you tense up and where do you get ease. So if you get ease as soon as you shut down your computer, that's information that's useful to you. You don't need to get into a story about it like, well, it's no good me feeling at ease when my work's finished because of course I'm going to feel better when my work's finished and I can't give up work. Blah, 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 blah. That's a story attached to that. Just notice throughout the day whatever makes you go, because it's not actually normally the absence of stuff happening because we actually need stress. We need something going on. Otherwise there's no... You know, we like overcoming challenges. We're an amazing species as humans. We like climbing mountains and overcoming problems and working out solutions and creating stuff. And that's not, so I don't mean like nothing's going on. Ease to me is that readiness for that excitement to embrace that. So noticing anything that makes you just go, yes, this is me. And then noticing the opposite of that. Notice when you're tensing up. So I think it can be actually really difficult to notice this. I think it's really surprising how often we are completely braced against the most ridiculously easy situations. For example, in a traffic jam, when you have no control and you can't literally push your car into, to force the traffic jam ahead, we tend to get very tense. If I'm not really driving anywhere at the moment, but when we have commutes again, if you are, a traffic light can be a really good signal to just notice where your shoulders are, because often they're actually really close to your ears or much closer than they need to be. And it's like we're pushing the steering wheel forward in order to push the queue, in order to push our way through the day and get there on time and push. And when you push through the day, you're using an enormous amount of energy. And noticing that can be really helpful, because often just noticing it is enough to release a lot of it, and then you get energy. But I actually think it's quite difficult to do, which is why I have like little tips like the traffic lights. But that's probably not the best one for you at the moment, because not that many of us are driving. So another one is when you clean your teeth in the morning, because you're going to always clean your teeth, right? So notice how much energy, how hard you're gripping the toothbrush. Notice how much of your arm and shoulder and jaw is actually involved in the activity. Just notice it. Because sometimes it's far more than is needed, because you're only cleaning your teeth. You're not using a jackhammer. So just noticing things like that can be good. Before you get out of bed in the morning, just noticing, how's my body feeling? Because sometimes we get out of bed, sometimes we sleep with tension, when you have a really bad night's sleep. Or often people sleep but wake up not refreshed, because we take to bed all of the stuff that's built up from the day before in our bodies, and then we try and sleep with it. It's like crazy. So we're not really, although we can be unconscious in our sleep, often we're not really relaxed, which is quite interesting. And I think that's because we've lost the ability to switch off. We're just working, or we're just on screens all the time. Everything's just on all the time. But just noticing that for you can be really significant. Another one's, so I'm just linking anything you do all the time. The kettle is a good one again. How much energy are you using to pour the kettle? Or when you open doors, how much effort are you putting in? How much tension is in your arm? When you walk, really feel into the muscles you're using. So when you go up the stairs, how are you moving? So it's really, the tension ease thing is really how you're doing something. It's not really what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. So are you going through your day overall, collecting tension and not releasing it again? Or can you just notice what brings you ease? Some people walk into a room and tension is created in the room. You can notice it, can't you? If somebody's had a bad day at work or something's happened, they're upset, they walk into the room, and that's quite a physical, if you notice it, it can be quite a physical reaction of everybody tensing. So just noticing that, getting good at noticing that, can be really helpful. Yes, you might be like 3 times as busy because you're homeschooling and working from home and everything. But because it's your rules, although it might not feel you're in charge, you are, it's your home, it's your domain. Whereas normally we're in other people's domains with their rules. So the time that you have to get to work, etc., the time you have your lunch break. So even though it might be quite tricky doing this at home, I think there's good opportunities for you if you can try and do that. And secondly, a really, really nice one to help you is noticing when your heart expands. So obviously the heart doesn't like expand as in a physical organ, but we're talking about the chest centre here, which is where we feel grief and joy. It's where we laugh from. So you can put your hands there now if you want. And this heart centre literally fills, like when you laugh or when you see something beautiful, something that moves you. And really tuning into that. What makes your heart sing, and what creates heaviness in your heart, and just noticing that. And then allow yourself to notice that and maybe be drawn and get guided by that, because whatever brings you joy, that's a little breadcrumb for you. That's giving you some information there. I think they're good things to just start to check in. So that was 3 things there. Actually I think it's probably more than 3. I'm going to try and summarise it. So one is, has your state of overwhelm changed during lockdown? And if it hasn't, it does matter to you, but that's not my point. My point is just notice it. Don't get too caught up in why and what's going to happen next and whether you need to quit your job or whatever, but just notice it. And get curious about that. Play with it. What is it that's changed or hasn't changed that might have affected that? And what opportunity have you got to investigate that further? So Can you during your day respond to the physical sensations from your body? So the need to move, the need to drink water, the need to eat nourishing food before you get so hungry you just end up eating rubbish, the need to stop gazing at a screen and gaze at something beautiful, the need to go and connect with someone. So if you're on your own, do you need to catch up with a friend? So just those basic needs, instead of going, I'll just get this done first until you're so tired that, it's kind of like it's too late to rest. You know, if we take short breaks, it's a really efficient way of resting, and it's really good to acknowledge any tiredness and really respond with care and kindness to our bodies, because they're so important. And I think that's really being highlighted right now, because it's your immune system. And then lastly, these two things of, when does tension happen in your body, or are you overusing muscles to do things? And when do you feel a sense of ease? Just noticing that, because it's really useful information. And lastly, what fills your heart? And can you allow more of that into your life? So there's just some ideas for you to make the most use of this extraordinary time. So it's not the idea that this time is better or worse. Obviously, the whole pandemic thing is much worse than normal, but there are opportunities for change and growth that I don't want you to miss. I really don't. I want Overwhelm to be completely optional for you, and I want you to be able to use this time when change has been imposed upon you, rather than feeling that you ought to make big changes, because big changes are exhausting. And I genuinely believe that until we do the inner work, making huge external changes doesn't always achieve what we want to do, and that we're still going to have to do the inner work anyway. And it just can be a much more laborious route. Not always. You know, if you need to make big changes, then you know better than me. But there's an opportunity here. Grab it. Use these questions. Use these body-mind connection ideas to gather more information on what's going on for you in this extraordinary circumstance. And lastly, I just want to bring in the practice of gratitude, because there's the temptation right now to really absorb all of the sorrow and grief and anxiety and fear, when actually, at the same time as all of that, there is joy, there is love, there is connection, there's a real giving, an outpouring of help and connection towards each other. So just for a moment, place all your awareness in the centre of your chest, your heart centre. Maybe place your hands there. Maybe close your eyes, not if you're driving or in charge of small puppies. And just allow your heart to fill with gratitude by just thinking of one tiny thing you're grateful for. Even if it is, thank God I made it through another day. However small, just notice that. There's always something to be grateful for. And just see if you can allow that gratitude to fill your heart. And notice how you feel.